Hello and welcome to Polio, a history of the life-saving vaccine. My name is Nicole Holmes, and I am the training coordinator for the immunization program at the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. Before we begin the training, we have just a few objectives to go over. By the end of this training, you should be able to understand the history of poliomyelitis, polio for short, understand United States polio requirements, understand the difference between inactivated and oral polio vaccines, and understand the process for vaccinating refugees. And you're invited to turn on closed captioning at this time. Here's an overview of what this presentation will cover. We'll begin with the introduction to poliovirus. Next, we'll explain inactivated poliovirus vaccine, also known as IPV, oral poliovirus vaccine, also known as OPV, and identify the differences between IPV and OPV, followed by key takeaways, resources, which can be found on the resources slide of this presentation, as well as the description bar below, and then we'll close with contact information. The virus, poliovirus. Polio, or wild polio, was discovered in 1789 by physician and microbiologist Michael Underwood, but it wasn't formally identified as a medical condition until 1840 by physician Jakob Hein. Polio has decreased tremendously since the discovery of effective vaccines. However, cases of wild polio were reported in 2 countries in 2021. So this means for us that there's still work to be done. Polio is a highly infectious disease which spreads through fecal-oral, from person to person, or contaminated food and water. Fecal-oral transmission is the process by which an infected person's stool spreads germs to another person, causing illness. This can happen when someone touches the stool of an infected person or an object contaminated with the stool, then ingests the germs. Polio primarily affects young children, but adults are not excluded. We'll touch on this a little later on. Polio attacks the nervous system and can lead to spinal and respiratory paralysis and, in extreme cases, death. This is a short video that will explain how different strains of the polio viruses emerge and provides examples for how to stop them.
Polio is a disease that causes permanent paralysis. We can't cure it, but we can prevent it. 2 important tools help to prevent polio, 2 safe, effective vaccines. One of these vaccines is given with just 2 drops into the mouth of a child. This is called the oral polio vaccine. The other is given with an injection. This is called the inactivated poliovirus vaccine. They both teach children's bodies how to fight off the polio virus, but they do this in different ways. The oral polio vaccine builds protection in the child's intestine. This vaccine not only protects the child who receives it, but also protects others around the vaccinated child. Several doses of the oral polio vaccine should be given to every single child in places where polio is a threat. The injectable vaccine builds protection in the blood instead of the gut. It helps to boost immunity and keeps countries free from polio. But it doesn't stop polio spreading between children, so it is not as useful in places where the virus is still circulating. We need the oral vaccine to stop the virus wherever it is found. Once polio has been stopped everywhere, the inactivated poliovirus vaccine will be used on its own to keep populations protected. Both of these vaccines have been approved as safe and effective by the World Health Organization. To do their job properly, they need to be given to all children, no matter where they live. Thanks to these vaccines, cases of polio have fallen by over 99% around the world. Let's vaccinate every last child. Let's end polio forever.
The vaccine, inactivated poliovirus vaccine, also known as IPV. IPV in the U.S. IPV was discovered in 1952 by Jonas Salk, an American physician. April 12, 1955, IPV was licensed, and IPV is the only poliovirus vaccine that has been used in the U.S. since the year 2000. It is also used globally. IPV provides maximum protection against severe diseases caused by the poliovirus. When asked who was responsible for the patent, Dr. Stalk said, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" This question challenges public health practitioners and clinicians alike to focus on improved health outcomes and efficacy of immunizations. U.S. requirements. IPV vaccine administration. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, also known as ACIP, recommends following the vaccine recommendations and schedules for adults and children. IPV is administered by injection in the leg or arm, depending on the patient's age. Infants or small children should receive it in the thigh. Older children and adults should receive it in the deltoid. IPV U.S. requirements. All 50 states require children entering childcare, whether it is private or public school, to be vaccinated with IPV. Philadelphia school requirements for students aged 0 months to 4 to 6 years old are the following: DTaP 5 doses, IPV 4 doses, MMR 2 doses, Hep B 3 doses, and varicella 2 doses. Here is a look at the full list of ACIP recommended pediatric vaccine and dose series. Here is a closer look at the ACIP recommendations for IPV dose series. It's broken down by timeline and number of dose in the series. If you draw your attention to the top of the screen, you'll notice many different months and years. Those highlighted with a red border correspond with the dose number below it, also highlighted with a red border. So let's break it down. The first dose should be administered at 2 months old. The second dose should be administered at 4 months old. The third dose should be administered between 6 and 18 months of age. And the fourth dose, which is the final dose, should be administered between 4 years old and 6 years old. If a child misses a dose in the IPV vaccine series, it is recommended that a catch-up schedule be applied to get the child's immunizations caught up to date. Here is a snapshot of what that catch-up schedule looks like. We advise that you work with the parent or guardian of the child to ensure they receive all doses so that they're not left out of school. And here is a look at the ACIP recommended adult vaccine schedule. And adults who may have missed this vaccine can still get it. However, you won't find the IPV listed on the adult vaccine schedule. And that's because the first dose of the series can begin at any age. The second dose can be 1 to 2 months after the first dose. And the third, which is the final dose, is recommended 6 months to 12 months after the second dose. And in 2023, the ACIP recommended that all adults are up to date on IPV. Those who are traveling to high-risk areas should receive a booster dose of IPV. The vaccine, oral poliovirus vaccine, also known as OPV. OPV. OPV was discovered in 1957 by Albert Sabin. This vaccine was licensed in 1961, and today OPV is used globally in over 150 countries. It is especially used in low-income countries. OPV dosing. Depending on the country, this will be a 3-dose or a 4-dose series. We have a few OPV dues when welcoming refugees in the U.S. We encourage that you do understand that immunizations administered outside of the U.S. should be accepted as valid if the schedules and doses are compatible with recommendations made by the ACIP. Do ask patients about their vaccine record. Do test for poliovirus, but only if the patient has symptoms. And do get patient consent to start an age-appropriate IPV vaccination schedule. And with OPV do's, we have OPV don'ts when welcoming refugees in the U.S. We encourage that you don't assume refugees have been vaccinated following the U.S. ACIP recommended immunization schedule. The difference. IPV is an injectable vaccine. OPV is an oral vaccine. IPV is produced from wild-type poliovirus strains. OPV is a mixture of live attenuated poliovirus strains at approximately 3. IPV requires a 4-dose series. OPV requires a 3-dose or 4-dose series depending on the country. IPV may be administered in combination with other vaccines. OPV may cause vaccine-associated paralysis in extreme cases. It is very rare. And finally, IPV is licensed and used in the U.S. And OPV is not used in the U.S., but is used in other countries worldwide. Key takeaways. Here's a recap of poliovirus timeline. 1789, poliovirus was discovered. It wasn't until 1840 that poliovirus was classified as a medical condition. 1952, IPV is discovered. 1954, IPV is licensed for use in the U.S. 1957, OPV is discovered. 1958, OPV is tested in the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. 1961, OPV is licensed. 2000, OPV is no longer used in the United States. And today in 2024, poliovirus is still not eradicated globally. Therefore, the global population is still at risk for contracting and spreading polio. We have a few reminders. 1, all children in the U.S. are required to receive IPV. And when refugees land, it's important to know the vaccine history, vaccinate the child if they're missing an immunization, and offer a new vaccine schedule to those completely missing the immunization. And here is a list of all of our resources used throughout this PowerPoint presentation. And here's a fun and informative resource for patients of all ages that the Philadelphia Department of Public Health's immunization program offers. It's a coloring book with important information regarding what polio is and why immunizing against polio is important. And here's my contact information. If you would like to know more about this presentation, please email me at nicole.holmes@phila.gov. Thanks so much for watching.